I'm Robert Emmett Hernan. I'm head of Blue Stack Productions, Inc., the publisher of Irish Environment, an online resource for environmental matters on the island of Ireland. We're here today for another in our series of conversations on environmental matters with Oisin Coghlan from Friends of the Earth and other positions. You're very welcome, Oisin.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Oisin, you're the head of the Friends of the Earth.
I am.
And you're also the representative for the Irish Environmental Network, correct, on the pillar, social pillar?
Yes, I'm the lead elected representative for the environmental pillar of social partnership, which I guess we think is one of the biggest achievements of ours of the last few years. And indeed, it's one of the big things the Greens have achieved in government, certainly from the civil society perspective. And it's giving the environmental NGOs a seat at the table along with the farmers and the employers and the trade unions and other social and voluntary organisations when things have been discussed with regard to Ireland's direction and future policy for the next 10 years and beyond. We're now at the table with those other players for the first time.
And when was the network formed?
The Irish Environmental Network itself goes back to the beginning of this century, to about 2001. I think it came about principally when other countries began to notice that Irish NGOs weren't at in international conferences in the same way as other NGOs were. And the UN, I think, even asked Ireland, how come you never have Irish NGOs with you when you come to the climate or the biodiversity conferences? And out of that, the government was embarrassed, let's say, inspired into giving a small amount of money to an umbrella organisation of NGOs to allow them to fund their participation. And it's grown from that. Initially, it was very much just a funding channel, and it's now grown into or evolved into a network of national environmental organisations.
And how many groups are within the...
There are about 30 groups in the network, and about 27 of those participated in the environmental pillar of social partnership.
And when was the pillar, when was the participation in the pillar?
The pillar became formalised in 2009, just last year, but there was 3 years of work by the network and by a number of groups like ourselves in particular in the network to lobby and campaign for environment's inclusion in social partnership. And the last government wouldn't do it, basically. And we spoke to the opposition parties before the election, and both the Greens and Labour said yes, they would support it, and it's something that the Greens negotiated into the programme for government. And then it took a while, even after they went into government, to get it done, but it's been done very well as a result, and it became formal last year with the pillar all to ourselves. We thought initially you might end up just as a strand of the social and voluntary pillar, but it's much more effective if they want to have us at the table to give us our own pillar, and there we are now in all those major discussions.
Now, Oisin, how does the network form positions in its participation in the pillar in terms of reaching either compromises or consensus position?
Lots of discussion, working groups sometimes, and then a growing degree of trust between the members of the pillar as we work together more and more, and as we learn to trust the expertise of people who are specialised in other areas other than ourselves. So, for example, Friends of the Earth is one of the NGOs most active on climate change. So we have done a lot of work on the pillar's climate change policy. But when it comes to biodiversity, it's something we haven't been able to work on so much recently. And we trust what others come up with on that. And then ultimately, for the pillar to take a position, basically half the members have to actually positively endorse it, and then nobody vetoes it. If somebody can say, no, I'm not happy, this isn't in accord with our fundamental principles, then we have to revisit it. But that doesn't happen very often.
And is there provision that somebody can opt out of a position if they feel strongly?
I think we have a disclaimer on our policies that this is this is a collectively arrived at position, but may not reflect the precise views of every member. You can stand aside and say, look, we're happy for the pillar to take this position, but we're not going to be involved in implementing it. But we obviously we encourage our members not to actually go out and say the opposite in public. If that's the case, we'd prefer to rediscuss it and come up with the position we're all happy to support.
Now, what's your view of how the network has been useful for the kind of environmental groups within the country in terms of forming those groups and having them?
The network as a whole has been fantastic in terms of just sort of fellow feeling. You know, it's been a bit of a lonely furrow if you go back over the decades. Being an environmentalist in Ireland, it's not been the most popular or profitable, to put it mildly, pursuit. So basically, having a common network gives you solidarity and affirmation that you're not alone and you're not a lunatic to be pursuing these issues. Then the second element has been funding. The government has put a small amount of funding into supporting environmental NGOs. In total, we're getting up towards €1 million now. It's increased in the last 3 years with the Greens in government. It's still, I think it was described as less than 300 metres of Irish motorway a year is the cost. So it's very small. And I come from 10 years in the overseas aid sector, where there'd be at least 2 million just for education on third world issues in Ireland by Irish NGOs, and let alone the millions we spend overseas, very, very rightfully. So by comparison, we're still in the halfpenny place in the environmental sector, but it is improving. So that funding is distributed through the network, which is fantastic.
To individual groups?
To the member groups, yeah, as much as, but some of it is held collectively for activities, for training, for example, but the vast majority of it goes directly to the member groups to support their work.
And how is that distributed? I mean, by membership?
It's done very interestingly, actually. It's a model that we will are happy to promote, which is that the government gives it to the network, but obviously it would be difficult if we had to actually divide it ourselves. So we employ 3 independent assessors, who are usually people who either there's a mix of academics or people from other sectors that we trust from the wider third sector in Ireland, or people who maybe used to be active in the environmental sector but now have moved on to do other things. So they know enough about what we're at and why we're at it, but they have no vested interests. So there's 3 of those, and they, God help them, read annual, like an application form, essentially a short application of about 10 pages from all 30 groups once a year, and they're scored. And the money is allocated. The main bulk of the money is allocated on that basis, and then there's some particular funds for participating in overseas conferences and for training or whatever.